the thing will flip on me again. Okay, so here we are, a little bit behind because I got up early this morning, but I couldn't bring myself to work on this. I had a cup of coffee and breakfast instead. So if you can see, let's see if the thing is reoriented itself or not. You can see, again, we've got pretty much parallel, or pretty much vertical until the middle of the strap, and then a taper, and then what I call a powder horn curve. So it's not straight, it sort of goes like that, to be exaggerated. And the intent is that when the person's wearing it, it's going to look like it's a straight line. So out comes the thread. My goal today is to have this apron shaped and basted. And I think I'm going to give it its first press as well, because then it can dry overnight, and then I'll get up at my usual pre-dawn hour and get the top band on, so that when the customer comes by at sometime after 9, he'll be able to take his kilt away for his first fitting with the tailor for his kilt jacket. Oh, and it is cold and wet out there. I mean, by West Coast standards. I know you prairie people and my ancestors in the eastern townships would be sneering at me for calling that cold, but it's not pleasant anyway. Okay, so I don't know how. Actually, I'll back up a bit. I'll say this is how I do it. And actually, this is how I do it these days. I start at the top of the kilt. I sew to the bottom. I sew the bottom. Yeah, down to the bottom. I sew across the bottom. I then baste to hold it flat. And then I do the hidden stitch up the inside. In the past, I would stitch along the bottom first, just to secure this, to get this absolutely right, because you don't want this cloth visible from the front. I would do that first and then stop, and then do top to bottom, because as I'd mentioned, when you're doing a fell stitch, the top bit of cloth can advance, or in this case, yeah, this bit of cloth will advance, it'll go up relative to this. So by doing that in the bottom, I would ensure that at least I was working towards a finished place, as it were. Now I've pinned it so that the design of the tartan is lining up with the design on what will become the fringe. But it gets a little more difficult here, because here we're more or less in a straight line relative to the tartan. But up here, because we're on a taper, we are sewing what amounts to the hypotenuse of a triangle, and thus quite frequently, when this is lined up perfectly, this is going to be a bit of out of line. So we do the best we can. Okay, so a back stitch at the top, and now you see what I mean? That's a bit offset relative to these two, and frankly relative to that as well. Ooh. Now you see how remember how you saw me sew the strap inside the apron pleat. That idea was suggested to me by a customer several years ago, because putting the strap on the inside as many do, sure, it works well enough, but the strap on the inside won't hold the fringe part down, so your kilt will be nicely done up, and the fringe will be sort of peeling away from the body, and it's not a good look. So I had been doing it that way up to that point, and he insisted I change it. And he was a rather large, imposing fellow, sort of standing over me. So I, inspired by that, I came up with this idea where now, as you see, it's trapped. It's sewn inside the deep pleat, and that means that it's outside the fringe and everything, and it's holding it taut to the body. It's a much better look. So I've reached the edge of the strap, and as you can see, I'm overcasting 4 or 5 or 6 stitches. Just added reinforcement. And now I'm going to do sort of a prick stitch. Very little visible on the outside, but the yarn, the thread is making its progress on the inside. You see what I mean? Now we reach the other side, and again, because I've lined up the tartan so that the edge of the apron comes up against this change between black and gray, it's fairly easy to sew a seam in a straight line, as it were, relative to the warp and the weft, because when we tease this fringe out, if the seam is all over the place, then you're not going to be able to you're not going to be easily able to pull out the yarns to make the fringed edge. Now I'm looking ahead, and you can see that's pretty much lined up. Let's get that needle out of that pin out of there. But if I lay it flat, they go a bit off. So what I'm doing is I'm curving the cloth, and I'm using my upper and lower fingers. I'm kind of pushing the several layers of cloth against each other. So with my middle finger, I'm pushing this bottom layer towards the top of the kilt, and with my thumb, am I pulling it towards the bottom of the kilt, or am I stabilizing it? You decide. But I've got the cloth just about lined up there, so by curving it like that, I'm helping to ensure that the edges, or the pattern, will remain lined up after it's sewn. Now this can cause, when you do this can cause a bit of a the appearance of extra cloth here. It can be kind of wavy, but when we iron it, that's going to shrink, and that should solve the problem quite well right there. Okay, doing the same again and again. Now this piece of thread that I've got threaded onto my needle right now is not long enough to make it all the way to the bottom, but that's okay. It's much handier to work with several short lengths rather than one immensely long length of thread. Just drop that for there for the time being. Oh. Now I'm not sewing with the gray thread, I'm sewing with, I think it's actually very, very, very dark navy blue thread. But, and frankly, it's not an invisible seam, because rather than prick too little of the cloth, I want, you know, if the seam isn't actually holding the cloth in the manner as securely as I want, I'm really wasting everybody's time. So, but I believe, see, it's not very visible there. And the stitches are precisely even. And I think that what happens is your eye just kind of, and I'm going to base this flat so it's, because it's kind of rolled up, but I think the eye kind of tricks itself because we see the twill detail of the black lines there, and we have stitching extending off that, and I believe the brain sort of tricks itself that those stitches are an extension of that, so it doesn't immediately, it doesn't grab the attention in the wrong way, shall we say. Okay, I'm just about out of thread here. I'm out of thread because it just ran out of my the eye of my needle. So what I'm going to do is, you know, pass some knots, or make a knot. 1, 2, 3. So my knot is right about there. And I'm going to do a couple of more stitches, and I can feel the click as the knot goes through the cloth. And the knot's buried. Great. So I'm going to cut that off, and then whatever the heck my good piece of beeswax went to. It's really annoying if that mouse carried it off, but I don't see why he would. Okay. Oh. This floor is feeling a bit cold, so at least I've got a, pardon me, a crossbar under this table that I can have my feet up off the floor. This, I have a carpet laid over the concrete floor, but when I was a boy, and when this was my grandfather's shop, this was a dirt floor. So, small things to be grateful for. Okay. I'm going to start back, there's the end of my seam, I'm going to start back a good inch. Pull that into the seam. Again, I felt the click of the knot entering the cloth. And even though it's maybe not strictly necessary down here towards the bottom of the kilt, I'm still using my thumb and my middle finger to sort of manipulate the cloth, the various layers of cloth against each other, so that I get as close to perfection as possible. And that's pretty good. I'm quite happy about that. Okay, here's the gray part again, where I have to sew as unobtrusively as possible. Let's get rid of that pin. Oh. So yeah, I'll be doing well if I might have time to get the top band on tonight. What I can do, no, actually, I'll get this apron done. Pardon me. And then I'll baste it tonight, and then I'll press it, and that'll take me to the end of my work day, so that it can dry out overnight. Okay, I'm just securing the corner, and I'm being careful that we don't see the layers of cloth sticking out, and there's one of them that's trying to escape right there. Get up there. Because you got like what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 layers of cloth there. Which of course makes it a bit thick. Take that pin out of the way. Capture those middle layers so they're not visible. Now as I advance my stitch, as you can see, I'm passing the needle through, straight through, and I'm advancing at an angle, but the angle is just about the same, very close to the same angle as the twill pattern, so that makes it less, it doesn't catch the eye. Again, our species evolved to always be conscious, be aware of patterns, and still remember that reminds me of my old, as they taught us in the army, why things are seen: shape, shine, shadow, silhouette, spacing, and color. Here we want even spacing. The next kilt I'll be doing after this, I'll be starting it, I think, this weekend. I'll be starting it tomorrow, really. Once this goes out the door. And it's going to be box pleated to the set, which I don't think I've done in a very long time. Okay, so I'm made a knot, and I'm passing a knot, because that's at the end of the fold, so I just passed a knot there. And I'm just going to put my needle down for a minute, pass it into the cloth so it doesn't get lost. Now, at this point, I'm going to baste this flat, and that's entirely to assist in the pressing, the first press that I'm going to give it. There we go. Again, starting down here. Back stitch. Now again, I'm just pushing the cloth down, holding the cloth down with this, so that the crease that we're going to be ironing is at the seam line rather than back a little bit, which would happen if the cloth was up a bit, and then you'd get a crease even a millimeter or so back. It won't look good. And how the cloth is humping up, how it's behaving, dictates how wide apart my bastes are. Okay, that's about as far as it has to go. So a back stitch, and let's using that pin just to keep the top of the cloth aligned with the top of the canvas. Let's throw baste across there. Pardon me. Good, that means we can take that pin and put it away. Okay. That's too short. That's right. One more base to do. Yeah. Come on, get through that down needle. There we go. Put that in my sleeve for a minute. Pardon me. So that needle came loose, so I'm just going to tuck it back in again right there. Now I'm going to flip it over. And I'm going to baste up the inside here, and I'm doing that about a couple of fingers in. I'm not doing it too terribly close because I have to get in there to do my hidden stitch, my blind stitch. But I also want this to be laying flat so that my blind stitch between the two pieces, the apron and the fold, are at a right angle and not at too much of an angle. So as I'm doing this with one hand, as you can see, I'm flattening out the cloth. Now, the cloth is, I won't say it's resisting me or fighting me or anything, but there's some shaping that's going to happen here when I iron it, because, again, hot iron, a steam iron, we can shrink, and we can also stretch the cloth. There's a little shrinking to be done here, but you'll see that in a while. Okay, let's just do that one more. And there, basting needle goes away. There's our needle again. I make sure that I haven't inadvertently sewn a visible loop. Okay, so I'm passing it up, folding the cloth back, and again the needle is going through the cloth at the same angle as the twill, because as I've said this before with the other apron, you can some people will just catch the merest amount of cloth, just a single yarn or two. And I think that's bad practice, because if it ever gets pulled, then that yarn is going to get pulled out of the cloth, and you've got a bit of a difficult situation on your hands at that point. So I'm grabbing a good amount of cloth with each stitch. Now, if there were large, or if there were a greater contrast in the cloth, where let's imagine this was white, and let's imagine it was here, or let's just imagine this gray panel was here, I wouldn't stitch my black thread in the middle of that. I'd put a stitch there, and a stitch in the middle of the red. So these two stitches would be very hard to see, but a stitch there, if it was a proper stitch with a proper amount of thread or a proper amount of yarn caught in it, it would be it'd be very visible. It wouldn't be a good look. So we just do clever little dodges like that. Okay. Where am I? I am here. So one more catch on the outer face, and then it's just going to come up into the canvas. And I'm not I'm not pulling that at all tight. It's just I just gave it a little tug just to see if it was laying flat and to make sure it wasn't dimpling. Take it up one more time, and then 1, 2, 3, and then through the canvas. And not still visible, so I'll pass it one more time. Felt the click of it go into the cloth, and away goes the needle. Let's carry straight on to do the basting. Let's start. So the inner apron, the outer edge is basted, the crease is basted. Let's baste that inside of the deep pleat. Find my needle, right on. Okay. Start about there. Just make sure it's all laying flat as it should. Now there's not much shaping to do here, so these stitches can be fairly loose, which is to say fairly far apart. They're what? A little over 2 inches, a couple of 2.5 finger widths. Now let's this inner part at the bottom of the deep pleat isn't projecting below, so I don't think I'm going to have to fold it back. If when the client puts it on, this becomes visible, then yeah, I'll have to do it while the client waits, but that doesn't take too terribly long. Okay. Now, because I fitted this to the client, now you can see there we do have it turned back, don't we? So let's get these yarns out of here. Is that long enough? No, it's not, but it's long enough for there. So now this basting is absolutely necessary if you're pressing a kilt, because as you'll see, you press a kilt and you press the outside, you flip it over, and the underside, the inside, the lower surface, pardon me, it doesn't look like it's been done at all. Okay. Now just looking at this, you can see how the cloth is behaving here. That some shrinking is necessary, and that will happen when we iron it. So trying to be conscious of try not to lean too far over the work so that you're not looking in the back of my head while I'm talking here. I think that's about as close as we're going to go. Now, as you can see, that's sticking out. We can't have that. And that's the result of the A-line. Is the inner apron is pushed down, or the apron pleat is pushed down a little bit. One of these days I'm going to be able to pass and thread a needle with a single pass, but there we are. Okay, So I'm going to fold that down. I used to start at the thin end. I used to start down here, sewing from the other side. But recently I've found I've had more success starting at the bite, as it were, where it folds back. So I'm making sure that the design, the set, is lined up. So we're not, if you can see those two lines, that they're not out of space. They're not out of place. They're lined up with each other. And it's just a nice little detail. Shows you were paying attention. Okay. Oh, for heaven's sake. The one time you can see that snarl, I put it through. Maybe this is the one. There we go. See, I tripped the knot. I tripped the knot again, and good. I saved the day, or did I? There we are. See how much that's moved. Oh. Here's me threading the needle again. Come on. Get in there. Now I'm not sewing it to the outer apron. I'm just sewing the two halves, the two folded sides of the apron pleat together. Okay, there we go. Looks good. Right, time to baste. Let's stop mucking about with recycled thread. Let's start with some new, unused cotton basting thread, which has managed to get itself tangled on the bobbin. Okay. Take about a little less than a fathom. Right, so I basically sort of divided into thirds. So at the bottom, I'm going to baste in the middle and baste at the bottom. So I guess the middle would be, let's say, about here, and the bottom will be about here. So I start at the edge of the inner apron, and we can see how the cloth is turned under. So, and this is, so what I do is I twist it out. Can you see what I'm doing there? I'm twisting the cloth out so that we have a uniform parallel stripe, like so. And then I baste it with a back stitch close to the edge. And I bring the next one up. And that looks symmetric, even between the black and the gray. That looks good. And again. There's a knot somewhere in this. Where are you? Well, that's irritating. Okay, well, I'm not going to untangle that knot. Where is it? Which is the freestanding piece. I'm just going to cut it off as close as I can to the knot. I'm losing about 8 inches, but what can you do? And then with luck, as I'm sewing, this knot will spill. Okay, let's smooth that out because we over tighten that. The other time you'd be doing this, rolling the pleat into position and then sewing it to keep it in position, is when you're rehabilitating a kilt, rehabilitating the pleats of a kilt, which have been messed about by a dry cleaner. You know, they put it on the table, they didn't baste it, they just pressed it, and then all of a sudden you're getting pie-shaped pleats like we see here. Okay, that knot is getting irritating. Let's shorten it up a bit. But not so short that it's up against the needle, because, oh, look at that. I just managed to put a fisherman's knot around the bite of the needle. Okay, we'll stop that right now. And we want it to lay flat, but we don't want to have any more dimpling of the cloth than we can really help. Come on. Yeah, that thread's going to break in a minute, so I'm just going to preempt that and cut it. Okay. Let's get a fresh piece of cotton, and hopefully I won't accidentally tie a knot in that one. In a way, I think it's kind of good for me that I've got that I'm recording this, because talking about it seems to occupy my attention span, or satisfy my attention span, because often if I don't have a podcast or something going in the background, I'll get restless and things take longer than they should. Okay, so I'd stone there, and then the usual back stitch. So I'm going to start with a back stitch on that same pleat. And again. Okay. I got about 1 million emails to answer, as well as the comments on the YouTube channel, which I haven't got around to paying attention to yet. I go through miles and miles of this white cotton thread. Is that good? Yeah. Okay, one more fathom should just about do this row. Right. This is going to look pretty good because as he walks, you're going to get that flash of red. That's going to look nice, mighty appealing. Good. Go. I can just carry on these pleats a bit. There. That'll do. Now we'll do the last row down here. And then I'll be ready to plug in the iron. More thread. I don't think, maybe it's not necessary for me to record me doing exactly the same here, what I did here. I'll do it about halfway and then I'll shut the vid off and then tune back in when it's time to start pressing. But same again, as you can see, horsing it into position. Take a intermediary stitch there. You get now, some would have it that this should be absolutely parallel from the bottom of the fell down to the bottom of the kilt, and that's a desirable ideal, but frankly it's not always achievable. There is a trick that I've been meaning to try, which I saw in an old British Pathé video, of using a ham, a tailor's ham, to press the seat of the kilt. And my old my old mentor never showed me that. But again, I saw it in that video. I'll see if I can find that video, if I'll include a link to it in the comments or in the description, sidebar, whatever you want to call it. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna get another piece of cotton, but I don't really think I need to record me doing the rest of this. I will, because this is, again, I shaped it on the customer. I am gonna stitch over it to hold it in place relative to the rest of the kilt, but I'm going to get another piece of thread, but I'm also going to shut the vid off at this point, and I'll tune back in when it's time to press.